Well, good afternoon, dear colleagues, and thank you for joining us today for this joint masterclass between Times Higher Education and the Western Balkans Info Hub. We will be focusing on how universities in the Western Balkans contribute to the region's sustainability agenda through participation in the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings. My name is Anna Orlova, and I'm the Regional Director for the Western Balkan region at Times Higher Education. In this role, I work directly with universities and higher education institutions, supporting them in achieving their goals, whether through participation in the global rankings, advancing sustainability initiatives, or enhancing their brand and reputation. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. First, we have Hannah Peacock, the head of the Impact Rankings and Teaching Rankings at Times Higher Education. Hannah and her team are the driving force behind the Impact Rankings, continuously striving to improve its excellence. We are also joined today by Elke Dahl, who played a crucial role in bringing this masterclass to life. Elke is a senior researcher and project manager at the Center for Social Innovation and serves as the project coordinator for the Western Balkan Info Hub. This is the project that aims to scale up cooperation between the European Union and the Western Balkan countries, focusing on the innovation, research, education, culture, youth, and sport. And I now invite Elke to share a welcome message with us.
Thank you so much, Anna. This is a very nice occasion for me to work on our stakeholder engagement and to involve universities that are very important for us, working in this nexus between research and innovation and education as well, and supporting for example, integration into the European research and higher education area of the regional actors. The Western Balkans Info Hub is supported through a Horizon Europe project at the moment with the acronym Policy Answers. I have the pleasure to coordinate that project, and I would really, on behalf of the whole consortium and also our broader network, thank the Times Higher Education, and in particular Anna and Hannah, who are dedicating their time to us today for providing this information. It's very important for us to thrive for impact in the region, impact of our project, improving and also measuring the outcomes and impacts that we have with our higher education institutions and the broader innovation ecosystem. So I think that also the Sustainable Development Goals are a key that the whole world has agreed on to achieve and work towards. And I'm very excited to learn more about how our Western Balkans higher education institutions can be contributing and are already contributing to these achievements, and how we can better measure that. So thanks a million for providing us with all these insights that you have. And the floor goes back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Elke, and thank you so much for your partnership in making this event happen. And we hope that our participation and collaboration with the region only grows years and years forward. Before we begin the presentation, just a few of housekeeping notes on our site. If you have any questions, please submit them in the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen, and we will be answering them by the end of the presentation. Of course, a recording of this session together with the slides will be shared with you shortly after the presentation today. And if you would wish to connect with Times Higher Education after, or if you have any questions on participation on the ranking itself, please feel free to reach out to the email that I will be sharing in the chat box shortly. And now we can officially begin our masterclass, and I will pass it forward to Hannah to continue.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Elke, as well, for that lovely introduction. So welcome, everyone. I'm Hannah Peacock. I am head of the SDG Rankings and Teaching Rankings within our data team at Times Higher Education. I've been working with the data team for almost 5 years now, and started working on the impact ranking specifically almost 5 years now. So I was there when it was created and first launched, and I've been working on it ever since. Today I'll be going through what the sustainable development, more of a wider picture of what the sustainable development goals are, why they're important in higher education, and then dig deep more into what the impact rankings are and what we do at THE, and how universities can submit their data and show their progress towards the sustainable development goals. So if we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, they were created back in 2015 by the United Nations, and they cover various different topics from SDG 1, which is no poverty, SDG 10, reduced inequalities, life on land, partnership for the goals, various different topics here, each one having their own targets and from another level, their own indicators as well. So 169 targets and over 230 indicators. So they are quite comprehensive and detailed as well, covering various different topics. So when the goals were created, they were created more so for governments or communities to be able to follow them and try to achieve these individual targets to then reach the goal. And this has been done as well in conjunction with the Agenda 2030. So recently, we have here the Secretary General of the United Nations. So back in May 2024, they kind of had a progress report of how each of the SDGs are doing. And because we're only 6 years away from Agenda 2030. And as you can see here with the graph, the green there shows that if it's on track or being targeted. Yellow a bit, but not so much, and then red being behind on those targets. So there is definitely a lot more yellow and red than there is green on these graphs here. So we do see a bit of a crisis of sustainability, and absolutely more effort needs to be done, either raising awareness, making governments or societies accountable for the goals, and also trying to collaborate together to be able to achieve them. So we are entering a little bit of that crisis at the moment, and that's why we do honestly believe that universities can play a big role in being able to tackle and address these SDGs. So what we have done and what we do with the impact rankings itself as well is we've been able to see how the SDGs are relevant to higher education institutions, and they absolutely are. A lot of universities touch upon every one of the SDGs in one way or another. And from when I first started the rankings and seeing the data that universities submit, they did come to us and say that they knew they were doing these projects or programs or actions, but they were never able to relate them directly to the SDGs till they were able to see that we were asking those questions. So already a lot of work that universities do can be directly related to the SDGs, and not just SDG 4, quality education, which covers lifelong learning and early childhood learning, but all of them. So with universities or higher education institutions, they can bring specific skills to the SDGs education, either in a direct manner or an indirect manner. Universities teach the future generation. And when we mean direct manner, it is more for the university community, so their students. But it can also be indirectly. So there's a lot of universities that do outreach programs for the local community and have a lot of educational resources as well for the outside community. So already we see universities acting on this. We then have research. So universities conduct a lot of research out there, and it can be used for innovation, this research, and it can be both scientific and social as well, and of course also be directly related to the SDGs. Then in terms of perspective, the higher education sector tends to think long term. So what we see with a lot of government or communities there, they're thinking the next steps, but not so much on a sustainability basis, which is always going to be long term. And economically as well, universities are significant economic drivers in their own right. there's an estimated 1.7 gross world product in the higher education sector alone. So universities do have a lot of significance in their local economies too. So what we see with measuring the Sustainable Development Goals is that to review them and be able to improve them and tackle them, there is a need for measurement. And what we see here, the measurement also needs to have quality, it needs to be accessible and timely. So quality, making sure that we're asking the data that is being measured is accurate as possible as it can be. So then we can have an accurate depiction of the work and things happening towards that SDG. It has to be accessible as well. So especially if we're on a global platform, not all universities, communities have the same resources either. So making it as accessible as possible. And then timely keeping track of the progress. And that could be on a year basis too. But it is important to keep track, and that is measurement, frequent measurement. So there are different measurement systems out there for higher education at the moment. We have the voluntary review, so where university sits down with their board or representatives of each of their departments and go through it voluntarily, reviewing exactly what the university is doing within their own community to tackle the SDGs. The only problem with this one is that it is very time consuming. It would be quite different to compare it to other institutions as well, because it could be very dense and comprehensive or be a bit more general. So it's hard to have a comparison with the assessment there. Then have student perceptions and awareness. So students as well are very interested in sustainability. It is a factor that they do consider when they're choosing their university. And it tends to be a bit undervalued as well. But students themselves are being more aware about sustainability and taking more interest and want to see it within their own university too. We then have accreditation companies that are also able to do assessments and provide that accreditation. And then there's external assessments as well. So that is where kind of the impact rankings come in, but there's definitely a lot more others out there. For example, STARS, the ASHE STARS reports, the evidence assessments. We tend to see North American universities participating in that one, but we have worked alongside them as well, and they're part of our advisory board because we want to see what we're measuring from universities and how we can improve it. So yeah, we created the impact ranking because we saw that again, higher education institutions have a big role to play in tackling the SDGs. So it was created back in 2017. And when we did create it, what we did was we really did carefully read all the UN's targets and indicators. And we wanted to make sure that it was as equitable for all universities as possible. Universities around the world, different regions have different challenges. So we wanted to make it as easy as possible and smooth as possible for universities to answer and to measure that progress with the resources that they have. We wanted to make it as inclusive as possible as well. So we see with other rankings that could be focused on research. They do have eligibility criteria as well. What we did when making it accessible is there's only two eligibility criteria. So you do need to be a higher education institution. So either teaching at an undergraduate level or a postgraduate level, and then to be an accredited university as well. There's no minimum research requirement. It doesn't matter if your institution is small, if it's big, those two are the only requirements that we need because, again, any university can and probably does do a lot of actions already towards the goals. So the first edition was released back in 2019, and I remember it well. We only asked about 11 SDGs back in that one, and had about 450 so universities participating. But it's been great to see how much it's grown, and we now already ask for all 17 SDGs. And we do have an individual ranking as well for each of the SDGs. So we have the 17 there. We focus on driving continuous improvement. So the thing with sustainability is that you can always improve on sustainability. If you have reached a certain target, then there's probably another one right next door, or to make it even more sustainable. So this is one of the things with sustainability, and it does differ from our other rankings because we're constantly reviewing our methodology. So we've had a few cases in previous years where universities were saying, yes, we do this action. Yes, we offer educational programs to the general public, which is great. But when all universities are saying yes, then we really looked into that target and made it a bit more complex, or dig deeper and to see how we can improve it and drive more sustainability. The impact rankings also make sustainability a strategic focus for university leaders. So what we have seen over the past few years is that a lot of universities are using the impact rankings as a framework to be able to address their sustainability, see where they may be lacking or doing really well, and from there be able to change their strategy when it comes to sustainability. So what we've done with the impact rankings and where does it fit? So we collect a lot of data from universities, and we have been for many, many years now. And what we do with that data is that we want to help universities understand their mission against their mission to help students choose the right universities or courses to attend, and most importantly, to help universities deliver on teaching, on research and innovation. So we do this with the data that we collect from our rankings. And if we look at our research mission, we have our World University Rankings, which is one of our flagship rankings, and a lot of universities have heard of it, but because it is focused on research, there are certain eligibility criteria there. So having 1,000 publications over across 5-year period, teaching undergraduate is essential. Postgraduate only institutions aren't accepted for this ranking. But again, the focus there is on research. We then have our teaching rankings, which I also oversee within our data team. So we have our Sub-Saharan University Rankings, Japan University Rankings, and online learning rankings, which is actually new this year. And we collected data back in March, and we'll be releasing it for the first time in December. So this one is focused more on student satisfaction and the teaching aspect of the data. And then finally, we have the innovation mission. So that is addressing sustainability, basically. And so the impact rankings have turned into the world's largest global sustainable university rankings out there in the world. And it's a ranking based on sustainability, but more specifically on the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. And back in June, we had our release of the Impact Rankings 2024. So we had 2,152 universities participating in that. So our largest one since, compared to the 450 that we had back in 2019. There were over 283,000 documents that we collected. So part of the Impact Rankings, we asked for evidence data, so URLs and documents to prove the actions that are taking place. And we had a lot to review there. So over 30,000 plus human hours have gone into reviewing that evidence that we've received from universities and validating it. The reason the ranking is so big is because, again, we review each of the targets across all 17 SDGs. So we have over 250 indicators, 75 metrics. It's turned into, well, it always has been quite of a beast of a ranking because we ask for everything there across the whole 17 SDGs. So the participation was around 125 different countries and regions, but if we look specifically at Europe's participation, here we can see the participation across each of the SDGs. So the line in the middle there is just the worldwide median or average of participation. So with this data, we've been able to see where the priorities lies in determining which SDGs are more important for certain regions. I mean, all SDGs are important, don't get me wrong, but it's just about priority here. So SDG 1, which is no poverty, SDG 6, which is clean water and sanitation, they tend to be participated less in the European region, and it's kind of understandable because compared to other regions out there where we see this participation is more like South America or Africa, it's not too big of a factor here in Europe. I mean, there's a lot of clean water out there, so it's not been a priority. What we can see is SDG 16 there, which is peace, justice, and strong institutions is important. SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities. SDG 9, which is innovation and infrastructure. And SDG 10, which is reduced inequalities. So we get quite a good look, and we had 567 European universities participating in the past edition of the rankings. If we look closer at the Western Balkans region, so this is ranked in our overall. We have 10 universities from the region, so not too many at the moment. We're hoping to increase the participation there. But the two highest ranking institutions out of the 2,000 plus that we have is the University of Kragujevac from Serbia and the University of Mostar from Bosnia and Herzegovina. So they both ranked in the 601-800 band. We have some, again, other honorable mentions, and they've been able to make it there in the ranking, in the overall ranking. So how do we measure? Let's get more into what the impact rankings, how do we measure what universities do and how they're able to tackle the SDGs. So what we've done is we've really carefully read the UN targets and indicators, and in a way translated them using a specific framework that we call the theory of change. So we can ask universities these targets in a way that they're able to measure that progress. So this framework is composed of 4 different aspects. We have the research aspect. So a lot of universities conduct research, and a lot of the research that they do is already relating to the SDGs. So for example, if a university has published something on renewable energy, this is already can be mapped out to SDG 7, which is clean energy, and even SDG 13, which is climate action. We then look at stewardship. So what universities are doing with the resources that they're entrusted with. And this can either be the outside resources, so the campus, the buildings, or it can be the physical resources, so the people, the employees and staff. We then look at outreach, so how universities are interacting with the outside world, either at a local level, so the local communities, or on a global scale. So a university that collaborates with a external hospital, that can be related to SDG 3, good health and well-being. If a university offers educational programs to the general public, so like a webinar or something, that's outreach relating to SDG 4, quality education. And then finally, we look at teaching. So universities also teach their students, so they're teaching the future generations really. How are they keeping sustainability in mind, either in their courses, which is one of the things we asked for in SDG 17, or it could even be how are they been able to develop and give more for the community outside when they're finished with their studies. So here we have an example more specifically on SDG 4 to just go through how we've been able to use this framework to translate the goals. So these are all the targets that we have for SDG 4, quality education. If we look at target 4.3 and 4.5, it talks about access to education, affordable education. and also to eliminate gender disparities when it comes to education and making it, non-discrimination. So this is where we ask universities for the proportion of first generation students. So we collect data from universities for all their students starting the degree within a certain academic year, and then which ones of those are first generation students. So the ones that are attending university out of their immediate family for the first time ever. We then look at, target 4.4, 4.5, 4.7, 4.8. You'll be able to see those on the screen. They do cover various different subjects, but again, it's partly making it available out there to the general public, not just those attending university. So this, we ask, lifelong learning measures is the metric where we ask these certain targets. We ask if a university hosts educational events at the university that's open to the general public, if they have educational outreach activities, so demonstrations, tailored lectures in local schools or in the community, if they have a policy that allows non-discrimination, so access to all of this educational resources, no matter if, regardless of ethnicity, religion, disability, or gender. So these are qualitative questions that we ask universities, and because it's not necessarily data that you can give to prove these actions, we ask for evidence data. So if you have an event that's open to the general public, you can just post out your link to it, and that is the data that we review. And then finally, for SDG4, we also look at the proportion of graduates with teaching qualification. So this is relating to childhood learning, early years education. And the reason why we ask this question is so we can see how many teachers are going out in the world, how many are the university presenting, so then they're able to teach the young kids, because education does need to continue. It is outside of just the university. We then have also taken target 4.7, so ensuring that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development. But we don't ask this specifically in SDG4, we ask for it in SDG17, which is education for the SDGs, or how are they dedicating sustainability and SDG education within either their courses, making campaigns to make it more aware, and offering that educational outreach when it comes to the SDGs. So I have mentioned that we have an individual ranking per SDG, but we also have an overall ranking as well. So this is the only one where it does need a minimum requirement to participate in the overall. So what we do is we look at SDG 17, partnership for the goals. And the reason we've chosen that SDG is because it covers collaboration and achieving all of the SDG goals. So we believe it's quite important, and that accounts for 22% of the final scoring. And then we look at 3 other SDGs that the university has submitted to, which can be any. The only thing is with the overall ranking as well is that we look at an annual score from 2 years. So we do an average of the 2-year score. If you are participating for the first time, then you would just be scored the same. So that's 22% of SDG 17, and then 26% for each of the SDGs, minimum 3 that you have participated to. And we choose the best scoring SDG. So we will still rank you and score you for all of the SDGs you have submitted to, but we choose the best scoring one so we can give you the highest score possible. So what the overall ranking is there for is to provide an international understanding of excellence, being able to compare all universities on the same scale, because not all universities participate in the same SDGs. We saw with the European participation that there's just different priorities around the globe. You can flexibly represent your strengths as well, so see which SDGs you are performing best at. And it is recognized around the world as well. So you are being compared with a lot of different universities there on that scale. So why do universities participate in the impact rankings that have been going on for a while? One of the reasons is visibility. So what we do with the impact rankings, because it is a global ranking, if you participate, you are on that global platform, and you're able to be compared as well again on that global platform, which can absolutely bring more insight into the data that you're collecting and efforts that you want to build in addressing the SDGs. Benchmarking as well. So what we would do with the data is once you are ranked, we release the results to you, and you're able to see which SDGs you're performing well in and which metrics. So this is data that we do show universities when it gets released. And if there's something that may be lacking, then your university can go back and say, maybe we need to put some more efforts in here because this is important to us. And then finally, if we compare it to other systems as well, so this graph is based on a survey that was done for European universities, and it was done at a United Nations forum a few months ago that our Chief Data Officer attended. Basically, they asked a room full of European universities, which assessment system do you use to address and measure your sustainability? And the bar there in purple is the impact rankings. So there is a bar here for the actual United Nations assessment, sustainability assessment, and HG stars is there too. But universities have tended to choose the impact rankings as well to be able to see the SDG progress. If we look at different case studies out there in the world, we do have quite a few big named universities participating in the rankings. One example is RCSI, University of Medicine and Health Sciences. We had a SDG forum on SDG-free good health and well-being a couple of weeks ago in Budapest. So I got to meet them as well. So they said the benefits of taking part of the impact rankings is creating a benchmark, attracting talent, and making an impact. The challenge for us now is to demonstrate our impact. That's why the impact rankings are so important. It's a very useful benchmark and framework for us to measure ourselves against. If we have another example by Ashesi University in Ghana, the benefits of them taking part that they've mentioned is global accreditation, creating a path, and telling their story. So the ranking is pretty much the equivalent of global accreditation in its own form. It allows you to be comparable to other universities who have no idea what the 1,600 universities of the African continent are capable of. We have a saying in Ghana, it is the person walking behind you who knows that the path you're trying to make is either crooked or straight. Ranking gives you a number in the queue. So they were ranked in the 2024 rankings in SG1 in the 200 band there. We had a massive increase of African universities participating last year in the impact rankings, almost double. So it's great to see representation again from that region as well. And then finally, we have a case here from Tecnológico de Monterrey. It's a private university in Mexico. So their benefits of taking part is to build a community, attracting students, and creating a structure. So the way I view the rankings is that it should be growing and a learning experience. So the feedback that we get for each area is highly relevant. It's a community of learning, and we are very excited to be part of that. We're a highly dispersed university with a large student body, so just collating the information was a challenge. Participating in their rankings helped us give a structure and a database in terms of how to bring all of this together. So these are just some examples of case studies of what universities have said about the impact rankings. But I'll now be going through the second half of our masterclass, the more detailed how to submit your data. So we've had, again, 10 universities from the Western Balkans region participating. So some of you may know this information already, but I will be digging deep into some of the methodology changes, how to submit data, what data we collect, and then some example pieces as well, how our evidence validation is, so really the detailed of what goes behind the rankings when in terms of a university participating. So when a university starts submitting data, they're able to select whatever SDG they want to participate into. So the only time it's mandatory if you want to be part of the overall ranking, it's mandatory to participate in minimum 3 SDGs and SDG 17. However, if you do want to participate in just one SDG to give it a try, we do see some universities doing this in their first year. You can just participate in that one SDG and be ranked in that one SDG. So how do universities choose which SDGs to participate to? So what we've seen, and a lot of the questions we get from universities who are just starting out with the impact rankings, is they don't know what SDGs to participate into. Some of them do strive to do the whole 17, but you could if you have the resources and want to. It's definitely a good way to see where you're performing across all 17. But if you are just starting out, my recommendation is 1 or 2. And these SDGs could be based on your institution's mission. So sometimes we have specialized schools of medicine or agriculture, and they would choose SDG 3, good health and well-being, or SDG 2, zero hunger. So sometimes that could be relevant to your institution. It could be regional as well. So what we saw in the participation stats for Europe, there's different priorities depending on the region. And then based on the relevancy of the activities done at your university. So what we have seen across the years that universities already do a lot of actions towards the SDGs. So what we see in unis is if they do cover a certain SDG quite often, they would like to participate in that one. We have created an SDG quiz as well, where we ask universities about 5 questions per SDG, seeing if you do have this data or not. So you just answer yes, no, or maybe. And from there, we give you a little summary of where you may be best performing in a certain SDG because you have the data for it. Then for our methodology, because we do cover, again, all 17 SDGs, our methodology is a whopping 190 pages long. So it is a very large document, and we do try to translate it in every language that we can. But at the moment, we just have the translation in 9 languages, which are listed here on the sheet. We've had a few changes from 2024, which I'll be going through over the next few slides. But we do use the English language for the master of all document for decisions. So because we ask a lot of questions, we do have kept it in English, but this does not mean that universities need to submit their data in English. So we wanted to make it as inclusive as possible for universities. So if you want to submit your data in your local language, that is absolutely okay. We have hired a certain team with different language knowledge to be able to review that evidence for you. So as we release the ranking every year and collect data every year, we also review the date of the data as well. So this year for the Impact Rankings 2025, we're asking for data from the academic year 2023. So the reason we've chosen the academic year 2023 is because it's from 2 years ago, and generally, we've seen that universities are able to provide accurate data and have that data settled, I guess. So this is normally depending on the region, typically runs from September 2022 until August 2023. So there's 3 different types of data that we collect. There's 3 different types of data that we collect. So that's research data, numeric data, and evidence data. For the research data, this is something that universities do not need to provide themselves. We collect this from our bibliometric partners at Elsevier using their Scopus dataset. And because we collect this data separately, all we ask universities is to make sure that they're correctly identified on Scopus, and they can work with their researchers to make their publications more relevant to the SDGs. So what we do with the publications that we review, well, I say we, Elsevier map out the publications based on SDG queries or keywords relating to each of the SDGs. And that's so each of the SDGs we've reviewed just publications that are been mapped out to that specific SDG and related to that specific SDG. Then for the other two types of data, we collect this through our data collection portal. So we run a data collection period, which is open last week, the 16th of September, up until the 11th of November. And then we go through a period of validation where we contact universities if we see any issues or flags within the data and try to either amend it or get the reasoning behind it. So what universities need to do here is to nominate a data provider, so a specific contact person that will be in charge of entering all the data and submitting the data on our platform. And then they'll be constantly informed of the progress of their submission as well and receive those results that we tend to release in June the following year. So we ask for numeric data and then we ask for evidence data. So we saw earlier that there's certain UN targets or questions that we ask universities that we can't collect with numeric data. So we collect it with qualitative data or evidence data. So this is how we're able to assess what universities provide us. We ask them a question and they provide us with a statement. So for example, does a university as a body collaborate with external hospitals to achieve good health and well-being topics? The university can answer here yes or no, or sometimes additional details, so a local, national, or global collaboration, for example. Then you're able to upload a piece of evidence. This evidence, what our team does, and it can be submitted in the local language, is we review it. If the evidence is very clear and answers the question, it would receive 1 point for specific. If it half answers the question or is not fully clear, but there is something there, it would get half a point. And if we see no relevancy at all, it would get 0 points. Only once we have determined if the evidence is relevant or not, it would receive a public scoring as well. So when submitting evidence, what we accept and what we don't, we only accept one piece of evidence per indicator. So last year we used to accept 2. This is now changed to just 1. URLs are the preferred type of evidence to receive, just because they're very accessible. But if you have documents or PDFs, Excel spreadsheets, photos, that is absolutely acceptable to be included here too. What we don't accept is video and audio files, mostly because they can be hard to translate if needed, or it's harder to review as well. And then we do recommend universities that the evidence is clear and direct. So what we mean by clear and direct is if you're reading the question and someone completely random sees the evidence, are they able to see exactly what we're asking for? We don't need a list of different events or something else. We just need one good example to showcase the action that's taken place. Then when it comes to public or private evidence, we again encourage URLs to be submitted. It's not mandatory, but public evidence does get an additional credit, so 1 extra point. The reason for this is because we want universities to actively showcase the work that they're doing, not just for us, but for the whole community or public or even on the global. If anyone's reviewing your evidence and going onto your university website and seeing that should be celebrated. And that's why we do give that additional points. However, we also understand that there's some private evidence there. So universities can select if something's public or private, and we also review it ourselves as well to see if it's public or private. So what we would accept as public is university websites that can be accessed by outside people outside of your university network. So you don't need any login access to do it. Documents that can be found easily online. Google Drive documents that are set as open, or third-party websites as well. So we see a lot of news articles as well. What would be an example of confidential evidence is documents with sensitive information, or Google Drive documents that are private or only available for those who have the access to a link. So although that's a URL, it would still be considered private evidence in this case. So how do we assess the evidence validation? So one of the changes that we're making this year as well is we're using AI in our evidence validation. So this is going to be a hybrid process. Before we would just have human validators reviewing all those 283,000 documents that I mentioned earlier. This year we're doing a hybrid process. So all the evidence gets scanned through AI, and whatever is machine readable and fits certain criteria would then get pushed to the AI, and it would review if it's relevant or not relevant. If it's not relevant, it will be rejected, however, still goes through a quality assurance process. If it's considered relevant, we then have our team of validators reviewing it and making sure that it either would get a specific or a generic score or not accepted at all. So still going through that quality assurance process. So what happens with the documents that don't get processed by the AI? So this tends to be not URLs, but documents, scanned documents, photos, for example, or maps. That just means that it will be pushed through to human validators. So we'll still be reviewing everything that we can. Well, everything that gets submitted will still be reviewed. So I'll now go through some methodology changes compared to last year's 2023 results. So one big one is what I mentioned earlier. We only accept one piece of evidence per indicator. There have been certain questions that we asked universities where we asked for two different things. We've now split these indicators so we can be able to ask for just one piece of evidence for them. We've added a metric 7.5 for low carbon energy use in SDG7. We've added an indicator for sustainability literacy. We're using the AI LLM evidence validation, which I've just mentioned earlier. And we're also doing more extensive continuous validation and QA checks. So using public data to review evidence, for example. So to review the numeric data that's provided. So these are the list of metrics, indicators that have been split out. Before we would ask for student and staff hunger interventions, but now we will ask for students and staff separately, and this is the case for a lot of these. So if you have any more interest in knowing specifically the changes, you can read our methodology as well. We have the new metric 7.5, so we also asked this in SG13, climate action, and there is a difference here where we just now have changed the weighting in the score as well with this additional metric. And then in SG17, metric 17.4, where we ask for education for the SDGs, we've added this new question in, which is not scored at all. We're just asking universities if they have any measurement on sustainability literacy. So this is not scored at all because we've never collected this data before. We're not sure if universities have this data, but it's just to see what there is out there, and it's not a mandatory question either. So how to make the most of your participation? Choose the SDGs which are relevant to your institution. So that could be just one or two of them, or to meet the minimum for overall. That's 3 SDGs and SG17. When submitting evidence, it should be direct, clear, and preferably public. You'll need to coordinate with your teams to access the right data for your submission. So collecting the data can be a bit tough because we ask for quite diverse data as well. So making sure that there's alignment between your teams in the university to make sure that the data is as accurate as possible. We go through a validation period as well, which typically is after we close in November up until mid-February, where we do ask universities in case there's any problems with their data. So do try to reply back to us if we have any queries. And then also, you could also use some new AI tools to support submission as well. So when creating these using their AI LLM for evidence validation. We've also built a couple products as well using the AI. So what we've seen are challenges for universities in the impact rankings is that it's a lot of work to go through the evidence and collect data. And we have a lot of guidelines as well that can be hard and a bit vague as to. So the team has created the evidence reviewer module just to go through different types of evidence that a university can enter into the product and see what the result would be. So here you can select whatever indicator you would wish to select and enter the URL as well. And then here it just gives a summary of what that evidence is stating and has in with terms of content and if it follows any of the key concepts as well. We then also have the best practice guide, which is done alongside this evidence reviewer. So it goes through each of the individual indicators and has 3 examples of best practices from different universities that have scored quite well in the rankings, but also are doing the actions that we're asking for. And it just goes through step-by-step access on how to achieve the different targets that we're asking for. So it's quite useful in that sense. So if you want more information around the Data Labs SDG Impact AI, feel free to scan the code or contact Anna Orlova here on the call or data@timeseducation.com. If you do have any questions regarding the specificness of the methodology, participation, if you want to access the portal, please do reach out to us at impact@timeseducation.com. And then finally, I will finish here this masterclass to let you know that we also do our World University Rankings, and we've got the World Academic Summit happening the 7th and 9th of October, so that is pretty much next week. And then our Global Sustainable Development Congress, which is happening in Istanbul this next year, will be opening in June with the release. So I'll now pass back to Anna as well there.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you for your presentation and in-depth insights on how universities can participate in the ranking, what are the requirements, and what are the changes that we are implementing compared to the previous year. I really hope that this session encouraged you to try yourself, try your institution to participate in the ranking and understand how you are making your contribution towards achieving the sustainability agenda in the region. And for the universities here who are already participating, it answers some questions on how you can improve your participation and what can be done to secure improvements year on year. If you have any questions, if you would like to get in touch or gain access to the data submission platform, which the submission for the data for this ranking is happening right now until the middle of November, please get in touch with us with the email details that are here in the chat box. And of course, the slides and the recording of this session would be shared with you after our presentation today. Once again, I want to say big thank you to Elke and for the Western Balkans Info Hub for supporting us on creating this session, Hannah for leading on the presentation today, and we are looking forward on working with the Western Balkans region and increasing their participation here year on year. Thank you so much, and I hope you have all a lovely day.
Thank you.
Thank you also from my side. Wonderful.
Thank you. Bye.